speak here today. Everything begins with an idea. 10 years ago, IRA volunteer Vincent Ryan was murdered by criminal and drug elements because he was at the vanguard of revolutionary ideas which threatened the very basis of their existence. Allied with a political class who were desperate to portray Irish Republicans as anti-peace and devoid of strategy, Vincent and his comrades shattered that illusion on several fronts in both national and international forums. When elements of the provisional leadership, in tandem with the British Security Service, steered the Republican movement towards an internal settlement, opposition to their efforts was not centred around the gun, but rather reasoned arguments of history, politics and international law. Blind loyalties was the very fodder the betrayal feasted on, and only through the passage of time, those who dined at that table now realise that the reasoned arguments put forward by Vincent and his comrades have been demonstrated as true. The end of the violation of our sovereignty did not occur in 2016. A so-called border poll was not the political panacea it was trumpeted to be, and as lucrative political careers became more established, the move towards establishment politics becomes more entrenched. But Irish republicanism cannot itself become entrenched in the politics of opposition. It must develop a politics of credible alternatives that removes our argument from the idealistic and into the realm of the everyday lives of our people and our communities. In his anti-drugs activism, Vincent grasped the reality by engaging with a drug abuse strategy developed by Republicans, which called for a radical new approach to this scourge. That initiative was the product of engagement with frontline activists and groups who daily tackle the many impacts of addiction on individuals, families and communities. That initiative was given its first public urn in Cork City. Republican activists hosted a community rally and invited residents to a meeting to address the issue of drugs abuse and view the new Republican policy. It was received with great interest and enthusiasm, not least in local and national media, who quoted extensively from the text. From that initial success, a national plan was developed to host similar meetings throughout Ireland on a rotating basis so that the experiences of each area would carry through. Derry City was the first area chosen, with a host of frontline activists from all over Ireland, and I was honoured to be in attendance myself. The meeting pulled no punches nor engaged in fantasy politics or ideological posturing. It completely trashed tired stereotypes and shallow perceptions and laid bare the extent and devastation of the drug abuse problem and what was needed to address it. The second venue chosen was Belfast, and here the true nefarious colours of the provisional movement was exposed. Having misread the signs from Derry, they were determined to scupper any national or community initiative over which they had no control. There was a wealth of community groups in Belfast who readily accepted an invitation to attend, only to be visited by the provisional representatives who threatened to remove their funding if they chose to attend. What followed was a smear campaign gleefully endorsed by sections of the media, portraying the organisers as mindless gunmen with no alternative strategy. It had the net effect of facilitating continued drug dealing and abuse in the very communities they claim to represent. What this episode demonstrates is the depth of thinking employed by Republicans like Vincent, who cared deeply about their republicanism and its relevance to the Irish people. And it is this depth of thinking which is required of Republicans today. The language of the previous phase of the conflict is redundant. We are now dealing with a generation of which too many have zero empathy with that struggle because they have no practical experience of it. The wheel cannot be reinvented. The Republican movement needs radical reform if its core message is to have any relevance at all. Our inspiration to initiate this reform stems from the sacrifice of Republicans like Vincent, his brother Alan, and all those on the Roll of Honour. To reiterate the opening quote, everything begins with an idea. Let us leave here today and search out those very ideas. Bear Bua.
Thank you, Gary. Now we're going to call on Alan and Vincent's brother Dermot, who'd like to say a few words.
We would like to welcome and thank everyone who was here in attendance today to celebrate Vincent's life on his 10th anniversary. Gorab Milamach Agwif Galer. Vincent was born on August 6, 1990 in Dublin's Coombe Hospital. He was the youngest of 5 boys and 1 girl. He was a blessing to us all. The youngest in our home, we adored him. Vincent was a very proud father to his daughter Phoenix, who was only 6 weeks old when he passed away. As a child, Vincent had many hobbies. He loved hurling and Gaelic football. He loved the dubs, bikes and martial arts. He boxed for Balgriffin Boxing Club and played for St. Monica's Derry Club for a period of time. He also loved playing the guitar and the latest trends and hairstyles. When Vincent left secondary school, he got an apprenticeship in plumbing, which he excelled in. He went on to become a very talented barber after he was released from Portlaoise prison as a political prisoner. Vincent grew up a very proud Irish Republican and activist. He joined the Fianna Ireland at a very young age, participating in commemorations across Ireland. Remembering our patriot dead in the mid and late 90s, he would march in the annual hunger strike in Bundoran, commemorating the 1981 H-Block hunger strikers. A few years later, he would be visiting his brothers nearly once to twice a week as they served time in Portlaoise jail as political prisoners. Vincent's activism started from a very young age. During his youth, he took part in many protests against austerity, the extraditions and human rights abuse of Republican prisoners, and royal visits. He campaigned alongside Marion Price, doing leaflet drops against the Lisbon Treaty. He later went on to join the Dublin Brigade of the IRA Anglican Ireland and became very active within its ranks. Vincent wanted to see a free and independent Ireland, free of British occupation, free from NATO and EU rule. An Ireland that was sovereign and indefeasible. Both Vincent and Alan were proud, active IRA volunteers who resisted British rule in occupied Ireland. Today we live in an Ireland that is unfree and not at peace. Political leaders in Stormont and Leinster House bend the knee to the occupier and the warmongering globalists who consistently push for wars. They also praise political leaders who had cosy relationships with paedophile and Mossad agent Jeffrey Epstein. Today, Ireland's healthcare system is a shambles. It stumbles from one crisis to the next. The elite and ruling class get quicker access to healthcare than those who are on never-ending waiting lists. Young people are fleeing the country as they can't afford to buy, rent or move out their parents' home. Parts of the north inner city, Dublin, have become homeless ghettos. Last year we had 8,000 household evictions across Dublin. Affordable housing and council housing are not being built, while a 336,000 bike shelter was erected in Leinster House. Our cost of living crisis is crippling the most vulnerable in society, causing poverty and addiction. In December just gone, Micheál Martin announced an additional 125 million in financial support to Ukraine, while Zelensky and his snatch squads kidnap young men and women on the streets of Ukraine as cannon fodder. Zionist puppet Zelensky openly, unashamedly called for unlawful US aggression against Iran. It was reported this week that Ireland will deploy its force defence attaches to embassies in the US, Britain and France. Defence and Foreign Affairs Minister Helen McEntee has received approval from Cabinet for the establishment of the network. McEntee is set to publish a new maritime security strategy. As she said, Russia is a threat to everybody. McEntee stated there's already a law in place that would allow Free State soldiers to board foreign oil tankers if there are security concerns, and the current proposal only relates to Russia shadow fleets. Ireland will allow the Royal Navy to patrol its waters and deepen naval cooperation with Britain and France to counter Russian threats. Taoiseach Micheál Martin has stated that the up-and-coming Ireland versus Israel football match should go ahead and thinks the FAI has taken the correct decision to fulfil that fixture. Minister of Sport Patrick O'Donovan stated recently that Ireland should fulfil the fixture against Israel after calls for a boycott. They say keep politics out of sport. They shout through the rooftops to ban Russia. The Russian phobia rubbish needs to stop. Russia is a friend to Ireland. Western leaders are leading us into a mess. Stop provoking, don't poke the bear. Israel and the US are waging war and butchering innocent children all over the Middle East. When it comes to sport, FIFA have a ban on Russia, but competing against both Israel and America, everything is fine. President Trump and the EU have Micheál Martin economically by the short and curlies. Micheál Martin has only paid lip service and expressed concern when Israel and US terrorists illegally bombed over 167 Iranian school children into the ground last weekend. The economic chaos of the Epstein war will spread like wildfire. For over the past 30 years, Ireland has refueled US warplanes at Shannon to fight illegal wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and they had the cheek to call Russia the aggressor. The real enemy is Britain, who still occupies Ireland today, along with NATO and its allies. Our politicians are more concerned about other nations' freedom and national sovereignty, while Ireland still remains under British occupation and EU control. For the past few years we have seen politicians north and south kiss the ground genocide Joe walks on, while Gaza and its people were bombed into the ground. No doubt we will see Micheál Martin grovel to imperialist gangster Donald Trump in the White House while handing over the bowl of shamrocks during St. Patrick's festivities. We see a rise of homelessness and addiction on our streets. We need more resources, more homes, more rehab and detox centres. There's over 17,000 homeless in Ireland now and 5,000 children living in emergency accommodation. The 26 county government are promising more homes, while most of them are not going to Irish people who are being treated as second class. The blame lies with those in Leinster House. They have created this mess. This is not the Ireland that Tom Pearce or Connolly visioned. The country north and south is awash with drugs. Heroin and crack cocaine is on the rise in every village town across Ireland. It has even crept into GAA clubs. In recent times we have seen ex-Finance Minister Michael McGrath and ex-Taoiseach Simon Coveney photographed posing with a drug trafficker who was convicted of the state's largest ever crystal meth haul. The convicted businessman was planning to flood the country with drugs for parasite cartels who get rich heap of misery and working class communities. This is no example. Elected representatives should be sent to our youth. The state-controlled media and gutter press tried to tarnish Vincent as a criminal and said he lived a lavish lifestyle. Vincent lived a far from lavish lifestyle, as did any of our family. In fact, it was the complete opposite. Our family despised drugs and never came from wealth. Vincent worked really hard providing and didn't drink or smoke. The state-controlled media and their gutter press spreaded malicious lies fed to them by corrupt Garda sources. The very sources who work hand in hand with drug gangs. Their sources also come from agents who masquerade as Republicans. These such fools are nothing but criminals with an agenda. Anyone who claims to be Republican and collaborates with drug dealers or turns a blind eye to drug dealing in exchange for money are nothing but scum who should be ran from our communities. Both Alan and Vincent are sadly missed throughout Ireland and Dublin's communities. Vincent was well respected by prominent Republicans across Ireland. He was buried in a dignified traditional Republican funeral. Former blanket men and families of the 1980 and 81 hunger strikers attended his wake and funeral. Vincent and Alan died with their principles intact, steadfast to the end, unbowed and unbroken, in a class war for political means. They never dishonoured the cause they believed in. They sought out to break the connection with England and defend our communities against the scourge. They tormented the belly of the beast in occupied Ireland and the Free State. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten. As we leave here today, Vincent and Alan would have encouraged us to put an arm around those who suffer from addiction or drugs and help them. Help them and their loved ones on the road to recovery, away from the misery and intimidation heaped on them by drug gangs. Say no to these parasites. Say no to drugs. Never will they label our liberation struggle as criminal. Here's a short quote from Patrick Pearse, the mother. I would like to dedicate this to Alan and Vincent from our mother. I do not grudge them. Lord, I do not grudge my two strong sons that I've seen go out to break their strength and die, dying a few in a bloody protest for a glorious thing. They shall be spoken of among their people. The generation shall remember them and call them blessed. For she boss, our son cheers you in a hearing. A nation once again. Bear with it. Rest in peace, Vincent. God bless you.